Vasishta continued, that is known as moksha or liberation, when ignorance ceases through self-enquiry, when the jiva becomes no-jiva instantly, and when the mind becomes no mind. So this is when the notional nature of the personality and the mind both become apparent. Self-enquiry is looking with what is looking into what is looking. It's directly seeing or directly experiencing. Since the ego sense, etc., are but like water in the mirage, or notions in other words, they're stories, they cease when the light of inquiry is directed to them. The light of inquiry is simply being aware, looking, turning the attention to these ideas that we have about ourselves and the world. They're stories that we tell ourselves. There's some stories that we realise are only stories, but there are a lot of stories which we totally adhere to as fact. Some people aren't very good at adjusting their stories. There was something on the news recently about a British businessman killed his wife, daughter, their dogs, their horses, set the house on fire, nice big house in the countryside, and then killed himself. It's a very tragic set of circumstances. And it seems that it was because his business had failed, and he had this story of himself as a success story. And he obviously couldn't let that story go or accommodate anybody else's story. I'm sure his wife and daughter would have had a different story to tell. But he had his story and he couldn't let go of it. And this resulted in tragic circumstances. And Vasishta's got another story for us. In this connection, O Rama, listen to the following inspiring and enlightening questions asked by a vampire. There lives a vampire in the Vindhya forests. Once it entered a certain territory, desirous of appeasing its hunger. However, it would not kill anyone even when it was hungry, unless the victim deserved such a treatment. So this vampire had its all-consuming hunger, but it tried not to apply it randomly, not to feed it randomly. So it clearly had its own story about itself. Finding no such person in the forest, it entered a city and met the king. The vampire said to the king, O king, I shall not kill you and eat you unless you deserve it. You are the ruler, and you fulfill the wishes of the needy. Pray fulfill my desire. I shall ask you a few questions. Give me the correct answer to them. So this is rather like the story of the demoness Karkati that we met way back in section 3, chapter 68. This demoness was a cholera virus and wanted to bring all beings into herself. But she struggled with her hunger by becoming established in wisdom. What is that sun, the particles of whose rays are these universes? In what mighty wind does this mighty space manifest? One goes from one dream to another ad infinitum, yet one does not abandon the self, though constantly abandoning the dream reality. What is the self? Self, I don't think it's so much that one does not abandon the self as the self never abandons us. The self is always present, it can always be turned to. As I said before, I'm quite sure we turn to it several times a day. This is the situation of the spiritual practitioner. One dream after another ad infinitum presents itself to us. This is the nature of reality. It's one situation after another, and it's dreamlike. I was watching this documentary about the Large Hadron Collider at CERN. The scientists are looking for this thing called the Higgs boson, a particle called the Higgs boson. And the reason they're looking for this is this particle is necessary in order to understand why particles have mass. They've got a good understanding of the nuclear components, the constituents of the atom. There are 16 subatomic particles. This is called the standard theory. But this standard theory does not explain mass. There's no reason for particles to have mass. So they've come up with this theory of the Higgs field, which must be associated with this particle, which they're looking for. They've spent billions of euros building this machine. It's quite extraordinary. And yet they know that through Einstein's famous equation, E equals mc squared, that mass is essentially energy. It's all energy. It's the dream energy. So we go from one dream to another ad infinitum, and the spiritual practitioner keeps coming back to the self, keeps abandoning the dream reality. This is the state of the spiritual practitioner. What is the self? The stem of a banana tree, when it is opened, reveals layer after layer until you reach the pith. This is a bit like what the CERN scientists are trying to do, peeling back the layers of the atom. But there doesn't seem to be much in the way of pith. What is that subtle essence when this world appearance is similarly inquired into? Of which atom are the universes themselves, minuter atoms? In what formless rock are the three worlds hidden, like an unsculpted figure in a rock? Answer these questions. If you do not, you certainly deserve to be eaten by me.